Hey, you know when you read something that just feels completely off, like out of step with how you think the world works now?
Hmm.
That's kind of how I felt looking into this recent Amnesty International report. It's about witchcraft accusations in Ghana.
Yeah.
Like today in the 21st century.
Yeah. It's pretty startling, isn't it?
It really is. It just makes you pause and go, "Wait, seriously?"
Absolutely. It's a tough reminder, I think, that even with all the progress we see, some deeply rooted beliefs,
Yeah.
they stick around.
Yeah.
And they can have really, really damaging effects on people's lives.
Right.
This Amnesty report, it really shines a light on a human rights issue that maybe isn't on everyone's radar.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing for this deep dive. We're going to unpack this unsettling reality of witchcraft accusations happening in Ghana.
Okay.
We'll be digging into that Amnesty report mainly, and also looking at some related news, like what CBS News covered. And our goal really is just to get a clearer picture. How widespread is this? Who's most at risk? And importantly, what's actually being done about it, if anything?
And I think it's key for listeners to understand right from the start, these aren't just like abstract ideas or old stories.
Yeah.
These accusations have very real, often devastating impacts on actual people, real lives.
Okay, so let's start there then. The scope. Just how big a problem are we talking about?
Well, the Amnesty report is pretty direct. It's not just a handful of cases.
Hmm.
They state that hundreds of people in Ghana are currently at risk because they've been accused of witchcraft. Hundreds.
Wow. Hundreds? That feels substantial. It's not insignificant at all.
No, it really isn't.
Mm.
And it's not just about, being called names or gossip.
Right.
The report makes it clear these accusations often lead to serious threats, actual physical violence, and in the most extreme cases, people are killed.
And what usually sparks these accusations, the report mentioned a connection to bad things happening.
Yeah, exactly. Often, it seems these accusations pop up after some kind of misfortune hits a family or the community.
Like an illness, maybe?
Yeah,
Or a sudden death?
precisely. A tragedy occurs, something unexpected or hard to explain, and
Mm.
it's almost like there's a search for why.
Mm-hmm.
And witchcraft becomes this available explanation, a way to point blame, unfortunately.
A scapegoat.
That's a good way to put it. When communities face hardship, sometimes the focus shifts to finding supernatural causes, and certain people become easy targets based on these beliefs.
And who are these targets? Does the report identify specific groups?
It does, and it's quite disturbing. There's a very clear pattern.
Okay.
Older women are disproportionately affected,
Mm-hmm.
especially those who are already facing challenges, living in poverty, dealing with health issues, maybe having a disability.
That's heartbreaking. Why them, do you think? What does that pattern suggest?
Well, it really seems to show how these accusations can latch on to existing vulnerabilities. Older women in these situations might already be somewhat marginalized. Maybe they have less social power,
Mm.
less ability to defend themselves. And sadly, in some contexts, they might be seen as, well, less valuable or even burdensome.
So when something goes wrong.
They become convenient scapegoats.
Yeah. The report also mentions something about women who don't fit, like traditional gender roles. They're more vulnerable too.
That's another crucial point. It suggests these accusations can also serve as a kind of social control mechanism.
How so?
Well, if a woman is seen as maybe too independent, or if she challenges the expected norms for women in that community, she might be more easily labeled.
Labeled as dangerous or having these powers.
Exactly. It's potentially a way to sort of enforce conformity and keep people within expected social boundaries.
Okay, and here's the part that I just found. Well, frankly, unbelievable.
Mhm.
The report says accusations can sometimes start just because someone had a bad dream about another person.
Right. A bad dream.
How can something so subjective, so flimsy, lead to such devastating real-world consequences?
It really highlights the immense power these beliefs hold in certain contexts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the complete lack of, any objective evidence. A fleeting image in someone's sleep gets interpreted as definitive proof of malevolent magic. It shows how easily fear and suspicion can spiral.
And geographically, is this happening everywhere in Ghana?
Not uniformly, no.
Yeah.
The report specifies that the vast majority of victims, these marginalized individuals, mainly older women, are found in Ghana's northern and northeastern regions.
Okay, so it's more concentrated there. Any idea why?
It likely points to a combination of factors.
Yeah.
Maybe traditional beliefs are more deeply entrenched in those specific areas.
Mm-hmm.
It could also relate to differences in socioeconomic development, perhaps less access to formal education or robust legal systems compared to, say, the big cities. Often these beliefs hold stronger sway in more rural or underserved communities.
So if someone is accused, what happens to them? What does their life become like?
It's grim. The report describes how they're often immediately cast out
By their own families.
by families, by neighbors, by the whole community sometimes, just
Hmm.
banished, cut off from everything they know, based purely on an accusation. Imagine that isolation.
It's hard to fathom. And where they go?
This is where these so-called refuge camps come in. They're often run by traditional priests,
Okay.
and many accused people end up there because they literally have nowhere else to turn. The report notes they can live in these camps for years, sometimes until they die.
Unless their community agrees to take them back, which sounds unlikely.
It seems quite rare, yes. And these traditional priests, well, they hold a certain authority in these communities.
Right.
So they might offer a kind of protection from immediate violence, a place to go. But
But the conditions aren't good.
that's what Amnesty raises serious flags about. They highlight a real lack of adequate food, safe housing, even basics like clean water in many of these camps.
So these are incredibly vulnerable people, already traumatized, living in precarious conditions, potentially indefinitely.
Exactly.
Yep.
It just underscores this huge gap in any kind of formal safety net or protection for them once they're accused.
It all sounds so bleak. Is anything being done? Did the report mention any legal efforts or government action?
Yes, there is some movement on that front, which is important.
Yeah.
The report mentions that Ghana's parliament actually passed a bill back in 2023
Okay. A bill to do what?
to criminalize the act of accusing someone of witchcraft.
Oh, wow. Okay, that sounds like a potentially really positive step, right? Making the accusation illegal.
It absolutely could be. It
Yeah.
would send a very strong signal that this kind of accusation isn't acceptable and has legal consequences.
Yeah.
It could act as a deterrent and, crucially, give victims a legal path to seek justice or protection.
Could be. But is it law yet?
That's the catch. The report notes that, as of their reporting, the bill hasn't actually been signed into law by the president.
So it's passed Parliament but isn't active legislation yet.
Correct. The intention is there, the parliamentary step is taken, but it hasn't crossed the final hurdle to become enforceable law.
Any sense of why the delay, does the report say?
It doesn't go into specific reasons for the holdup. Legislative processes can be complicated.
Sure.
There could be various factors, political priorities, maybe debates about the specifics, possibly even some resistance from segments of society where these beliefs are still strong. It just shows that passing a law is one thing, getting it fully enacted and implemented is another.
And Amnesty International, what are they pushing for now?
They're being very clear. They're urging the government to sign that bill into law, obviously,
Right.
but also to go further. They want specific criminalization of the ritual attacks that sometimes follow these accusations. And they stress the need for real protective measures for potential victims.
Protective measures like what?
Well, things beyond just making accusations illegal. It could mean setting up genuinely safe shelters, not just these poorly resourced camps, providing access to legal aid for the accused, support services to help them rebuild their lives if they've been banished, addressing the violence directly, too. It's about a more comprehensive safety net.
The report quotes Genevieve Partington, she's Amnesty's director in Ghana, really hammering home the need for this legislation and protection.
Yes, and it's worth noting her connection, or Amnesty's connection, to the Coalition Against Witchcraft Accusations.
Okay.
That coalition actually formed after a particularly horrific incident in 2020. A 90-year-old woman, Akua Dunte, was publicly lynched after being accused.
Oh my God. 90 years old.
Yes, that tragedy really brought a lot more attention and urgency to the issue, galvanizing groups like this coalition. It's a stark reminder of the lethal potential of these accusations when left unchecked.
And while this deep dive focuses on Ghana, it's important to realize this isn't just happening there, is it?
No, absolutely not. The report touches on this broader context. Belief in witchcraft and the resulting accusations, sadly, are found in many communities across West Africa and other parts of the continent.
Why is that important context?
Well, it helps us understand that this isn't some isolated anomaly unique to Ghana. It points to potentially wider cultural factors, social stresses, or historical contexts that might be at play across different regions. And the report gives some truly harrowing examples from other countries, too.
Like where?
For instance, they mentioned Zambia, where recently 2 men were actually charged with practicing witchcraft, accused of having charms to harm the president.
Yeah.
It shows how differently these beliefs can intersect with legal systems.
Right, whereas the push in Ghana is to protect the accused.
Exactly. Then there's an awful case from Guinea Bissau last year. 8 women were blamed for the deaths of 2 children, forced to drink poison, and they died.
Forced to drink poison. That's medieval.
It's almost unimaginable cruelty based entirely on unfounded blame. And it doesn't stop there. The Democratic Republic of Congo saw 2 older women publicly stoned and then burned after accusations.
Stoned and burned. Publicly.
And in Angola, there were reports last year of around 50 deaths linked to people being forced to drink some kind of herbal potion to prove they weren't sorcerers.
50 deaths from being forced to prove innocence of sorcery. This paints a really grim picture across the region.
It really does. It highlights the scale and the danger when these beliefs are acted upon without challenge or adequate protection for the accused.
The report brings in some voices from people working against this too, right? Like Leo Igwe in Nigeria.
Yes, Leo Igwe, who founded the Advocacy for Alleged Witches group. He makes a really interesting point, linking these accusations to how elderly people are treated more generally.
How so?
Suggesting it reflects a wider societal issue, perhaps a devaluing or neglect of older people. Those accused are often already vulnerable, elderly, maybe seen as frail or unproductive. The accusations can become a way to further marginalize them. It touches on ageism.
And someone from Ghana, Samaru Saibu.
Right, from the rights group Songtaba in Ghana. He brings it back to those key factors we discussed.
Yeah.
Gender and poverty.
Reinforcing that connection.
Exactly. Echoing how these accusations often intersect with existing inequalities. Poverty can breed desperation, making communities perhaps more susceptible to finding scapegoats. And gender is undeniable, with women being the overwhelming majority of victims, reflecting patriarchal structures.
These factors, age, gender, poverty, seem to create a kind of perfect storm for vulnerability.
They certainly seem to contribute to creating an environment where certain individuals are much more likely to be targeted than others.
It was interesting the report also briefly mentioned the church's stance, like in Angola, with Pope Benedict urging Catholics to shun witchcraft years ago.
Yeah, it just shows the different angles on this. You have traditional beliefs, human rights advocacy, governmental responses, and religious institutions all weighing in or having a role.
It's complex.
Very. Tackling deeply rooted beliefs requires engaging with all these different aspects, ideally while always centering human rights and avoiding further stigma.
Okay, so pulling it back to Ghana and the Amnesty report specifically, what are the main things they're saying need to happen, the key recommendations?
The number one most urgent recommendation is clear. The Ghanaian government needs to sign that pending bill into law.
Criminalize the accusations and related attacks.
Yes, that's seen as the foundational step, providing that legal framework for protection and accountability. That's the cornerstone.
And beyond the law itself.
They strongly advocate for a wide-reaching sensitization campaign.
What does that mean practically? Like public service announcements?
It could involve things like that, yes. But more broadly, public education initiatives, especially in those northern and northeastern regions where accusations are most common.
Okay.
The idea is to directly challenge the harmful superstitions, promote more critical thinking, provide fact-based explanations for misfortunes like illness or death, and just generally raise awareness about the human rights implications of these accusations, trying to change minds at the community level.
Which sounds crucial, but probably very challenging.
Undoubtedly. Deeply held beliefs don't change overnight, but it's seen as essential alongside legal reform.
And what about the people already in those camps?
Amnesty is very clear on this too. They stress the government's responsibility to ensure basic human needs are met in those refuge camps now.
So stepping in to provide adequate food, safe housing, clean water, sanitation.
Exactly. These people have been effectively displaced and ostracized. The government has a humanitarian obligation, Amnesty argues, to ensure their basic dignity and survival while longer-term solutions are sought.
So wrapping this up then, it feels like the big picture is, well, it's a really stark human rights crisis happening right now in Ghana, driven by these persistent witchcraft beliefs, putting hundreds of vulnerable people, mostly older women, facing poverty or marginalization in serious danger.
Yeah, danger of abuse, banishment, even death. And while there's this potential legal protection sitting in Parliament, it's not law yet. The safety net isn't there.
And it's a reminder, too, that this isn't just Ghana's issue. It echoes problems seen elsewhere in the region, showing the devastating impact these kinds of beliefs can have when they collide with vulnerable populations.
Precisely. It highlights that ongoing tension, doesn't it, between traditional beliefs, cultural practices, and the universal principles of human rights. The lack of strong legal recourse, combined with those underlying issues of poverty and gender inequality, creates this space where accusations can flourish with terrible consequences.
This whole deep dive, it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, what does this situation truly reveal about the cracks, the vulnerabilities that can exist within societies, and just how powerful harmful beliefs can be, even today? And maybe what difference can shining a light on this internationally actually make in pushing for change?
Yeah.
It feels like looking into this situation in Ghana it's a sobering glimpse into a really complex problem with huge human costs, and it really underscores why protecting human rights and actively challenging traditions that cause harm is just so vital everywhere.